Hello, I'm going to talk about abnormal uterine bleeding and menorrhagia. Uh, First of all, there's a bit of a change in the way we define bleeding, and the whole idea from 2007 onwards is that no longer do we use terms menorrhagia. It's supposed to be called abnormal uterine bleeding, which is any menstrual bleeding which is either abnormal in volume, which is excessive, or abnormal in timing or regularity, bleeding that can be postcoital or postmenopausal. So it's a broad term that encompasses everything. Obviously, what we are going to talk about mainly is menorrhagia, which means heavy menstrual bleeding, where the menstrual blood loss is so much that actually interferes with the woman's physical, emotional, social, and material quality of life. Mm. Intermenstrual bleeding is that which occurs between menses. Postmenopausal bleeding is something that occurs after menopause. Postcoital bleeding, obviously, something that happens after intercourse. Right? Any form of abnormal bleeding can be either acute or chronic. Acute is something which happens over a period of 1 month or 15 days. Chronic is something which has been happening for the last 6 months. Um, See, these are the terms that we classically read everywhere else, and these terms should be discarded. In fact, terms like menorrhagia, which is classically described a normal menstrual cycle between 21 to 35 days, no longer do we use these terms. Terms like metorrhagia, menometorrhea should be all given up. The whole idea is to say abnormal uterine bleeding and then describe what actually happens. Yeah. One second. Sorry.
Just be a little more louder and keep talking.
Yeah. I think I've come to this slide, but it's not really visible, which shows FIGO classification of causes of bleeding. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The whole idea is that Munro et al. Said in 2011 that all causes of abnormal bleeding can actually be classified into one mnemonic, which is PALM-COAN, and it stands for various different things. PALM for P for polyps, A for conditions like adenomyosis, L for fibroids, M for cancers, hyperplasia. Similarly, COAN stands for a lot of other issues. COIN stands for a lot of other issues, which include endocrine problems, iatrogenic problems, which are something that doctors themselves do, like putting in an intrauterine contraceptive device and so on and so forth. So it's a mnemonic, and when once you know we remember this, it's very easy for us to actually look at the causes of abnormal bleeding. As I said earlier, a lot of doctors of the past would say dysfunctional uterine bleeding, but this is a term that's no longer used because we know that most women who have dysfunctional uterine bleeding actually have some blood disorder or some problem with their ovaries or some ovulation disorder, right? So how do we actually come to the bottom of irregular or heavy menstrual bleeding? Obviously, we need to know whether it's something that is happening over a short period of time or a prolonged period of time, whether it's acute or chronic. It almost always exclude pregnancy. Obviously, we take a detailed history, we examine the patient, and we keep the PALM-COAN mnemonic in mind because it helps us sort out what the causes of bleeding are. Obviously, the doctor is going to ask for blood studies, a pap smear, we look for infection, and we also do a sonography. Certain issues that always keep in mind, which are known as red flag features. If there is any growth inside, like a pelvic mass or anything that needs an endometrial biopsy, where there's persistent irregular bleeding, or if the size of the uterus is very large, then we need, these are things that we suspect to be related to cancers, and therefore you need to consult somebody who knows gynecological cancers. Right? So, in short, there are n number of causes that can be there at different age groups of life, and it's very difficult for anyone to actually look into these causes, but all of them actually fit into the PALM-COAN mnemonic, and it's very easy for us to figure out what is happening. I just wanted to highlight two things. Women who are about to reach pause, either they're perimenopausal or postmenopausal, these are the women in whom cancers can predominate, and we always keep that at the back of our mind. We always investigate women with these kind of issues. Mm. Yeah. So heavy menstrual bleeding or menorrhagia is what we were going to discuss. It's any form of bleeding that actually the woman herself feels is subjectively feels that it's very heavy and it interferes with the physical, emotional, social, and material quality of life. Technically, it's something that is more than 80 ml or duration more than 7 days. Uh, yeah, a few facts for people to remember is it's fairly common. It happens to 3% of all women. As you age, the risk increases. Um, a very large percentage of women will actually have no obvious cause that is detectable, and these are the women who have slight amount of coagulopathy, which is actually a small blood disorder which can cause heavy bleeding. But these are all causes that can be easily taken care of.
One question asking what is HMB?
HMB is heavy menstrual bleeding. This is what I was actually saying earlier, which means that no longer do we see, say, menorrhagia. We just classify all forms of bleeding as abnormal uterine bleeding and we describe it. If it's heavy menstrual bleeding, we call it HMB. That's how it is. If there's no bleeding at all and the person doesn't have periods, then we just say she's amenorrheic or there are no periods at all. Right. Some more facts for your just a fact here that 18 million women aged between 13 to 55 years will perceive their bleeding to be heavy per year. In fact, out of 30% of all hysterectomies, that is removal of the uterus that are done for menorrhagia, we'll find that there are no actual abnormalities that are easily detectable in the uterus. There are different ways in which we can actually quantify this heavy menstrual bleeding. The best form, as I said, is subjective assessment, where the woman herself tells us that, look, this is very heavy for me from what I've had previously. But then there are quantifiable methods, which are very technical, like alkaline hematin methods and a pictorial blood assessment chart, where there's an actual chart in which she colors based on what she feels is heavy menstrual bleeding and gives us an idea of what is happening. Uh, how do we actually work up if you come to us with heavy bleeding? Obviously, we do a large number of blood studies, which include a complete blood count, and we also look at thyroid function tests and liver function tests. As I said earlier, we'll always tend to rule out pregnancy. Most women will almost always be asked to do an ultrasound examination, which is a sonography of the pelvis, a pap smear, and other things depending upon what these investigations actually tell us. These are just photographs of what a normal endometrium or a thickened endometrium look like. I don't think they're visible for you all. Yeah. So anyway, to get to the gist of all this, once all these investigations are done and a patient still has a lot of heavy bleeding, we almost always ask them to do what is known as an endometrial biopsy or a curettage, which means a part of the lining of the uterus is removed and it is sent for evaluation. There are three types of reports that we get. One is where there is very little tissue, which means that the lining is atrophic, there's hardly anything, which is something that we see more commonly in elderly women. A proliferative endometrium, which is normal and does not require treatment. This is what you would see in the age groups between 16 and 40 usually. And the third category that we cross is something known as endometrial hyperplasia, which means the lining of the uterus is a little thicker. A small word on hyperplasia. Hyperplasia, that is excessive thickening of the lining of the uterus, happens when there is excess of estrogen in the body. Estrogen is a hormone that is produced by the ovaries. Now, this protracted estrogen stimulation can happen due to n number of reasons. Some of them, like women who do not have children and are nulliparous, or women who have polycystic ovaries, or they have, as we would commonly call, a hormonal imbalance. These are the patients who would normally have excess estrogen and then endometrial hyperplasia. Diabetes, hypertension, and obesity can all contribute to this condition. The importance of this condition is that it can cause abnormal bleedings, it can be associated with hormone producing tumors, and can progress to cancers. So that's something that we always keep in mind. This is a chart for, it's a very technical chart because endometrial hyperplasia is of different types. The simple type where it can progress to cancer in only 1% of women, and a complex type which can be, which has a higher chance of going to cancer. Right. Again, some more technical information on this condition known as endometrial hyperplasia, where usually in most of the women it regresses on its own and you really don't have to do much for it. Right? But 40% of cases can have an associated cancer. So we always look at these conditions very carefully and treat them rather than not actually treat them. A word of caution for everybody: every time we do an endometrial biopsy or anything of that sort, if there is a cancer, then one should go to a gynecologic oncologist so that they can give you the correct treatment. Right? Again, yeah, so finally it comes down to what is the treatment for women who have heavy menstrual bleeding or those who have menorrhagia. Obviously, as I said earlier, we try and evaluate the cause. Once we've got the cause, which is either hormonal or something of that kind, then initially we start with simple tablets like tranexamic acid, which you get commonly over the counter also. These are simple tablets, they are not hormonal, and they try and reduce the blood flow actually by almost 30%. So they're quite effective. If this doesn't work, then we actually go to hormonal pills, which are oral contraceptive pills, which actually regularize the hormonal balance in the body, and they reduce the blood loss by almost 60%. There are different kinds of hormones, those that contain estrogen and progesterone, those that contain only progesterone, but they all act in a similar way and stabilize the hormones in the body. Then there are more complicated hormonal treatments like GnRH agonists, which are hormones that act at the level of the brain, which act on the pituitary. They are very, very effective in stopping bleeding, but they're quite expensive. They have a lot of adverse effects, and they can only be given for a certain length of time. Then there are drugs like danazol, which are not really used now, but they are very effective. They have a lot of side effects. These side effects are very androgenic, in the sense that hoarseness of voice, excessive facial hair growth, and so on. So they're no longer really used now. And finally, after doing all these medical forms of treatment, if nothing else works, then we really have to go into surgical treatment. The most commonly done surgery is dilatation and curettage, which means that under anesthesia, the lining or the interior of the uterus is actually scraped out so that the bleeding stops. It stops the bleeding, and secondly, it can also, the material is then sent to the pathology lab, which gives us an idea as to exactly why these things are happening. Hysteroscopy is another technique that is used, where a laparoscope is put inside the uterus, and with that you can take a look inside and see if there's anything abnormal. And then there are a whole load of therapies that can actually help. Laser ablation, balloon therapy, and so on and so forth. And the last and final alternative is actually removal of the uterus, which is a hysterectomy. Right? So basic essentials that we do for all women who come with heavy menstrual bleeding or menorrhagia is we find the basic cause. Obviously, the care is individualized. If a patient is elderly, in her 60s, has heavy bleeding, then obviously removal of the uterus becomes one of the first lines of treatment. If she's young and in her 20s, obviously it's more a medical treatment that matters. So we individualize the treatment, thorough workup, and obviously we educate them and reassure them that everything's okay. Just a few pitfalls that we need to remember, and all of us need to remember. Heavy menstrual bleeding can be a sign of pregnancy. It can be a sign of cancer.